Hi, thank you for tuning in to the Finding Harmony podcast with me, your host, Harmony Slater. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Harmony, and I am here today with a beautiful guest,
Thank
Nina.
you.
Not
You've
you.
never. Oh, sorry.
You're my co-host.
Oh, right. Yeah, jumped the gun.
But our guest today is Nina Rao. Who,
Really?
Yes, I'm so happy to have on our show.
Wow.
She has a voice like an angel, so beautiful. The first time that I came into contact with your kirtan was actually on that CD, the Krishna Das CD, The Flow of Grace with the Hanuman Chalisa, when I was trying to learn the Hanuman Chalisa and going through verse by verse. And then we met again doing a retreat during COVID online. You came and so graciously did a little kirtan for our retreat group. And I'm so happy that you are coming to speak with us today. Thank you so, so much. It's wonderful.
Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
This is really incredible. This is really like a big one, a big fish.
A big fish.
I've just for the listeners at home, because a lot of them, they like to do their Sunday morning practices, and they listen to the podcast while they do them, and they do their little back bends. I wonder if you could you give us a little window into what you're doing, because you seem to be doing a kind of asceticism while you are doing the interview. Could you describe what you're doing for those who are listening?
Well, okay. We can talk about that. So let me just start by saying that my spiritual practice is one that's continually changing. And I would say it began with a certain amount of clear intention back in 1996 when I met Krishna Das. I mean, I am Indian and I have been involved in spiritual practices ever since I was young. But it wasn't with the understanding that spiritual practice is for our benefit and to benefit all beings. It was just something we did, right?
Right.
So when I started practicing yoga, actually back in the mid 90s in New York City, and I met Sharon Gannon and Eddie Stern and all the luminaries in that realm, is where I was first exposed to chanting in the West, because my grandfather was a chanter as well, to Krishna Das and various others. But it was really with him that I had this heart-opening experience. And I understood from that moment on that my life had taken a turn. And I understood that this was what I was going to do, because the way I felt by doing the chanting was something that I wanted to kind of explore more and more. So that's just taking you back to the beginning of my practice. And for those who don't know me, I do chant. That's what I do. From the Indian tradition, we chant Indian mantras, either in the Veda style, that's something that I've been learning recently, or singing kirtan or bhajans or prayers in long form with music. But more recently, 2 years ago, I was really blessed to meet this wonderful Lama named Garchen Rinpoche, who lives in Chino Valley in Arizona. And I had heard about him when I watched this incredible film called For the Benefit of All Beings, which everyone should watch. It's free. It's on their website, garchen.net. And I've always been very drawn towards Tibetan Buddhism ever since I got on this path of practice, mostly because so much of the reading I've been doing is, Sharon Salzberg, Robert Thurman, Joan Halifax, these people who are very involved in Buddhism. Joan is a Zen Roshi, but still. And because Tibetan Buddhism is so related in the way the practices are done to Indian Hindu tradition, I feel very comfortable in it, And so meeting Garchen Rinpoche, I saw the film, and what you see Garchen Rinpoche doing all the time is turning the prayer wheel, which is what I'm doing at the moment.
Hmm.
And he does it as his, it's just like he's breathing. There's nothing extra going on. And I was very drawn to that, when I saw this in the film. And when I went to see him 2 years ago, I, you're in the presence of a being, they're talking, smiling, the embodiment of love and compassion. He's a really beautiful being. And this is what he's doing. And he explained, and everything that was going on in his institute is for the benefit of all beings, actually. All the prayers that are happening is for our well being. And he tries to live a long life. He's 87 years old because he's a bodhisattva. So he's doing this for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I understood, and this from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, is that whenever you start your practice, you raise bodhicitta, right? Which is that you wish that all beings should also have a compassionate heart, and with that compassionate heart, we say prayers, and those prayers are then dedicated for the benefit of all beings. So it's a beautiful circle. It's an amazing way to start your practice, is to set that intention. And then so I just found that very beautiful. So I was watching him turning the prayer wheel the whole time. And in the prayer wheel, we were told our microfilm of like millions of prayers that have been recorded that are in there. And when you turn the prayer wheel, you offer it, just like prayer flags blow in the
Beautiful.
wind, you offer it to all beings, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're going to be doing nothing and your arm is just kind of hanging out, or you're chewing your nails, why not just turn the wheel,
Yeah.
But it felt like, I just felt like I couldn't. It felt too pretentious. I'm just being very honest with you right now, okay?
Yeah.
And so when I went to the gift store and they were selling the prayer wheels, I didn't buy one because I thought, no, I don't deserve to have this if I'm not actually going to use it the way it should be used.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw him this year. I went back this year, and again, the same thing, very drawn to this prayer wheel. Just like, we turn a mala sometimes in our hands, like many people walk around doing the mala. There was just something about this where you're offering it to everyone that felt really potent to me. And so I walked into the gift shop and the store manager said, Nina, I want to show you something. And she took the prayer wheel and she put it in my hand. And I said, okay, I guess I'm buying this prayer wheel. So I bought the prayer wheel and I went into the program, and Garchen Rinpoche, I had chanted the White Tara mantra when I was there, and he had listened to it because that is the mantra, the deity that he is considered an emanation of himself,
Oh,
is White
beautiful.
Tara. Yeah. So he's very sweet. He wanted his picture taken with the band, so we
Yeah.
were sitting there. And I thought, I'm just going to use this prayer wheel the whole time I'm here. If he's doing it, then maybe some of it will rub off on me.
Yeah.
So we're posing for the picture, and he says, give it to me. So I gave him my prayer wheel, and I thought, oh, he's going to bless this. Like, this is amazing. He's going to. So he takes it from me, and then he gives me the one that
Oh.
he was using. And then I thought, okay, so he's giving me some encouragement, and then he's going to take it back.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he never
Take.
did.
Oh,
Oh,
So now I
wow.
feel like it's my responsibility.
yeah.
Yeah. To keep it going.
Oh.
It's my
Beautiful.
responsibility. And it's like, okay, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And it's not pretentious. And
No.
it's like chanting mantra. It's like,
Yeah.
the great beings like Maharaji would say to Neem Karoli Baba would say, go on chanting your false Ram Ram. Someday you'll get it right. So in the same way,
Yeah. I love that.
we're going to do this too. So that's
As
the
he,
long story.
Oh,
yeah,
it's so
as he
beautiful.
runs across the water, he's like, I don't think I'm getting this mantra. I'm not getting it right. It's amazing. I feel that very deeply. It seems so much a part of our common conversation with so many people that we meet about this feeling of pretension and
Mm-hmm.
what are we allowed to do. And by all, I was told very early that what I was supposed to do was be a good Baptist and
Mm.
never dance and never sing and just sit very quietly in a cubicle in the pew, as quietly as possible and not be heard. That's that's where that's what they want from us. If I was being honest and true to my indigenous roots, that's what they would seek from me. But instead, you're drawn to things,
Yeah.
you seek them out, and it feels right. And then then I'm in India doing puja, learning how to
Yeah.
do puja, and I've got a little sculpture of Veda Vyas, and I'm doing the thing, and I'm like, am I allowed to do this? And how do we know when we're allowed to do something?
Well, if your teachers, whoever it is that you're learning from, suggest that you do it, accept that. But also, just as you know, when you were in India, and even here, like for me, when I walk around on Fifth Avenue in New York City, I walk into a church and I know that I'm welcome to sit there and be part of the mass or whatever
Mm,
is going on, right? And puja, the thing about puja, it's just a very beautiful thing, like having your own altar at home, and it's so, so personal.
mm,
This is how we're going to develop a relationship with divinity that appears to be outside of ourselves, but actually is who we are a part of, right? We just don't
mm,
recognize that. And so making the offering in that way is so important to create that and to feed that connection. And
yeah.
so, how do you know whether you can do it? Because spiritual practice as a human being is what is our dharma. That's what we
Yeah.
should be doing. That's what all the teachings are telling us. Like, if we, especially, in India and Tibet and so on, we have to honor our birth as a human being, as a blessed one, as
Mm,
one that is a great gift from eons and so many births and so many different levels. If you want to, you can listen to, there's so many different ways about talking about this. And for some people, it might just sound so fantastic and out of the realm of possibility and its imagination. Fine, never mind that. Think about then how it feels for you. Do
yeah.
you feel better?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so you started by saying that you resonate with something. So you have to trust that. If you don't
Mm,
trust what you're feeling in your own heart, who are you going to trust?
Mhm.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, and I like also that you were talking about how your spiritual practice has evolved as well, and I think that's so important because sometimes we get really fixed on a form,
Hmm.
and as we mature or evolve or grow in our own, personal development or spiritual development, I think it's natural too that the way we're going to connect with the divine or the things that are going to resonate with us will also change and evolve as well, or different practices will come to us at different moments in our life.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And, for those of us who are born in this day and age and this place,
Yeah.
where we're not born into a very specific lineage where you
Mhm.
know what you have to do.
Mhm.
I say this to people all the time. It's like you have to create your own lineage.
Yeah.
But the thing about lineage is that when you're doing your practices, like you started out as ashtangis, right? When you started your yoga
Mhm.
practice, probably,
Yeah.
and that's why you end up in
Yeah.
Mysuru. I don't know if you're still practicing in that way. Probably you've changed a little bit, you've,
Mhm.
modified for your age. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why you might change. You might
Yeah.
meet other teachers, other forms. As a woman, You might have a different, so many different reasons, right?
Yeah.
But you are sticking with practice. Like you've understood that doing the practice is what's going to deepen your relationship with divinity, with
Mhm.
that presence, with the one consciousness, that place that we want to be connected to all the time. So the key is that while we might be exposed to all kinds of teachings, it is good that it resonates with us, because if it resonates, then you'll do it.
Yeah.
But it's also good to deepen one's practice with one thing,
Mhm.
whatever that is for you. One or two things. Add a few things, take away a few things now and then. But really, to dig one deep well is where you're going to have the access
Yeah.
to the holy water, you know?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, and when I say it evolves, I would say my relationship to the practice is what has evolved.
Mhm.
And I understand that the more I do practice, the more I am confident that the practice is working on my behalf for my well being.
Mm.
And so, with that, you have more incentive, more inspiration to continue with your practice. And the more practice you do, the deeper you go, the more you're able to let go of the obstacles and the things that feel detrimental for you, things that are emotionally upsetting for you, things that take you away from that place of love and peace and equanimity,
Mm.
which is, as far as I can look, like, what is divinity to you? One has to ask that question, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I was recently thinking about how annoyed I was with all these dogs we have,
Hmm.
and we have to walk these dogs all the time, and I have to clean up after the dogs all the time, and it's constant attention to these dogs, and I have to go for walks with these dogs, and I'm outside all the time. And then I kind of remember, like, oh yeah, I used to do yoga practice, and I don't do that. I have no time for that. And and then I'll be walking and I'll be, trying to squeeze the Mula Bandha and pulling in Uddiyana Bandha and breathing deeply, trying to breathe deep. And then I'm like, while I'm walking, I'm very much aware of you know Prakriti as material. I'm witnessing things, hearing things, smelling things, and it's all just a bit overwhelming. And it's like too much. It's just too much to experience, you know, um, life. And and then I'm like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I liked about yoga in the first place. And I'm just like out walking the dogs, and it's nice to have, because I wouldn't have had that if I had just stayed. Well, I don't mean to put um, uh, the Baptists down, but if I, it was it's very different way of experiencing divinity and humanity, is being able to rely on these practices to do these things at any time, and even like even when you think you're not doing your practice.
Well, when you're talking about how you're feeling, I completely understand. The practice just becomes so much a part of you, and you become the practice.
Mm.
That, so for example, because I chant a lot, and if you've chanted, let's say you do like a deep sadhana, you do um, all night Sri Ram Jai Ram, let's just say,
Mhm.
and you wake up in the morning, you have your tea, and you feel good about everything, and you start to realize that this mantra is like just going on inside of you all the time, and it's the weave of, it's the fabric of our lives in so many ways. So
Mm.
whatever that is for you, like when you're doing those mulabandha, whatever it is that you're dealing with when you're walking, that is your way of connecting with your own pranic flow and all the subtleties and everything that's going on outside of your body with the universe. You're outside with your dogs, you're taking care of them, you're probably amongst some trees and some greenery, the sky, the air, the breeze, you hear the birds, and then you can feel part of something. Sometimes we get so lost in our thought thought minds, and then we feel like we're in a bubble and we feel so separate
Yeah.
and disconnected, and it doesn't feel very good. And that's when it feels like life is just too much. But if you can open up the space and like feel like this connection to a greater sense of being, there's some comfort in there. I think there is. Do you feel that?
Mm. Yeah. And it's just a wonderful irony that you could feel so far away from your practice and then find yourself doing it anyway. It's like, this is not the right circumstances for practice. I was told how to make that
I was
happen.
told it needed to happen on a sticky mat.
I have and there's like inside, away from bugs, on a clean floor, and then it's like, oh, but actually I'm still just doing it.
I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more. What you said reminded me, I was just teaching a yoga retreat in Turkey, and we always start the morning with a little meditation, and then we do some pranayama, and we also do some chanting. Not in that order specifically. Actually, we do the chanting usually after the meditation, but and we would do 108 repetitions of a different mantra. Depends on sort of the retreat or what sort of energy we're focusing on. And when I explain about mantra, I talk about how the Sanskrit syllables activate different energy channels and nadis in the body. But I would just love to hear you explain the power of mantra, and even just very simple bija mantras, or because there's just so much. I am by far not even close to an expert or even a beginner in the realm of mantra, because I feel like there's so many. There's how do people find what resonates with them? I love the Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram, and the repetition of a single mantra, I think, has a lot of energy and power as well. So I'd just love to hear you explain your experiences with the mantra, and how it works for each individual, or on our systems, on our bodies, on our energy level,
I mean,
consciousness.
I'm just not an expert on this
Mm.
at all. I really am not. And
It's so
I
vast,
learned,
right?
well, it's actually mystical,
Yeah, yeah.
so there isn't really a formula that
Mm.
says, when you do this, it's going to activate this. As far as I know, there are
Yeah,
people who know such things and will talk about them. Like, for example, bija mantras, I have no idea. Like, you have to be initiated into the
yeah.
practice by specific teachers in that lineage. It's a very specific practice.
Mm-hmm.
And in India, there's a vast, there's so many different
Yeah,
lineages of chanting. It can be from the north, south, and if from the south, it's this sampradaya, it's that one. Like, it changes, right?
yeah, yeah,
So that's why I'm saying, like, we're not born into those lineages. So we have to figure it out.
yeah,
We have to create our own lineage. Like, where are we coming from? Just dropped from the sky in this place, and we're resonating with these practices. But I feel very confident that the fact that so many of these teachers came to the West, like starting with Vivekananda, like so many, hundreds,
Yeah, yeah.
couple of
mm-hmm.
hundred
In
years ago,
Chicago.
and yes, and then the continual movement of Westerners to the East to learn from Eastern teachers, and then a lot of the teachers coming here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the color of your skin or the place where you're born that's going to determine the practice that you're going to
Mm-hmm.
do. You're going to receive the teachings because you were drawn to it, right?
Mm.
Yeah,
And so for me, for chanting, I love all kinds of chanting. Like, I listen to Gregorian chanting. I like to listen to, you know, different traditional folk chants from around the world. I always have been interested in that. But in terms of what I like to do myself, it very much is from the Indian tradition. And I recognized that the type of chanting that really resonates for me and just feels like moves my cells around in a particular way, reallocates everything, is Veda chanting, and
Yeah.
it's an old practice from the Indian tradition, the Hindu tradition. And I never thought I would be able to learn it because I didn't have a teacher. It has a very specific rigor and structure.
Yeah.
And it was actually during COVID, it was actually because of Eddie.
Oh yeah.
Eddie Stern was doing some Instagram live with this young woman
Yeah.
from she lives in Belgium, she's Indian, and he was talking to her about her practice, and she comes from a tradition from where I'm from in India, from Karnataka, and
Beautiful.
it's from the Mysore Sampradaya, and she speaks the same language that my family speaks, and I just felt so connected to her, and I loved that it was a woman,
Yeah.
because most of the time the ones who are
Yeah.
doing and teaching these practices are men,
Mm-hmm.
and women are told that you can't do them, and then if you're not from a certain caste you can't do them.
Yeah.
There's such a cultural overlay on these practices that actually in their purest form were available for everyone. It's hard to see that now because of the way in which society has changed things, and there's
Mm-hmm.
caste, and if you're from this caste you can't do these practices. That's not how she teaches it. That's not how she teaches it. And they refer back to the original Rig Veda texts, which in themselves will say how the practices are to be done. And nowhere in there does it say that it's not available for other people.
Amazing. That's
If they say that it's a brahmachari practice, brahmachari doesn't mean someone who's from a particular class who needs to renounce this and that. All it means is that you're going to dedicate yourself to this practice. And there are certain things like vegetarian diet is better, things like that that they say are helpful for doing the practice. But it doesn't say that you can't do it if you don't
right.
follow those principles.
Yeah.
Okay, so I joined her class immediately, and I've been studying with her since.
Oh,
I haven't
amazing.
met her, I've only seen her in person. And now, by some strange way the universe works, we're actually doing a retreat together in South India at the
Amazing.
end of November, where she's teaching Veda. It's a sound healing retreat. And I'll be leading some kirtan, and there are other people doing various things. So, trying to remember the original question. Okay, so about how does mantra actually? I
Work.
don't know how it works. All that I know is that these are wisdom syllables that
Yeah.
were transmitted to rishis or seers who were doing very intense tapasya at some
Mm-hmm.
point in time when they could. And they received this wisdom in the form of these sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And you unlock them by listening, but also repeating. So it's like watering a seed, and then from there blossoms the plant inside of your own heart. It's not something that someone can give you. I mean, they can. There are
Yeah.
beings that can do that.
Yeah.
But this is our way of doing what we need to do for ourselves to find our way out of suffering,
Yeah.
because that's our human condition, is that we experience suffering
Yeah.
and that there are causes for this suffering. But the Buddha also told us that there's a way out of the suffering, and there is a particular way in which to do it. So, and then the practices all come from there. So he's talking about a time later after the formation of the mantras that I'm talking about, which
Yeah.
was during the Veda time, thousands of years before. So my understanding of it is that the more you do it, the more you will understand in your own heart how it's working for you.
Hmm.
And it's not a flow chart. It's not necessarily even linear. It's
Yeah.
not even something that you can evaluate where everybody is, if you do this, you're going to get there, if you do this. And it's different for each person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how they work, but what I do know is that I like doing them.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to chant mantra than to sit quietly and meditate.
Mhm.
And in my experience with my guru, the practices that she gave us were all chanting practices.
Mhm.
She said, Maharaji never said to me to sit and meditate. What they did say is that by doing these practices of prayer or chanting, the state of meditation will arise on its own.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
But you
Yeah.
have to do the practice and you
Yeah.
have to create a discipline for yourself
Yeah.
and you have to stay with it. I mean, you take on other things like learn, expose yourself to other teachings, but stay with the practice and deepen your experience of that practice by continuing to repeat.
Mm.
And that's been my experience ever since I remembered chanting with Krishnadas. I've just gone further and further down this path um, of chanting kirtan, which is just call and response repetition of mantras like Sri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram,
Mm-hmm.
but also longer form prayers like the Hanuman Chalisa, which
Yeah.
is what you heard on Flow of Grace.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my experience has been that it's given me first and foremost a refuge or a sanctuary or a place to go. Just because we all need that. We have to be able to get out of our minds and find a place to go that's inside of us. And these practices are a place in, I mean, they're outside of us. But the moment you turn towards them, you turn towards your own self, your own
Mm.
inner being.
I
It's
love
so
that. Mm.
it's really fantastic. That kind of sense of a seed of evolving and awakening and growing of its own accord. Um, with practice, it reminded me of something that happened to Harmony and I recently. I'd really wanted to take her to Chicago to see where I went to school and go to the Art Institute and see all these paintings. And when I was in school there, we had a free pass, so we would go every day. You know, and I I did. I went every day for hours to go in the Art Institute, and I knew every nook and cranny. I thought, and we were there, and and I was so excited to show her. And I wanted to talk and talk and talk and talk, and we got lost, and we took an elevator, and we took some odd elevator that I'd never been in before. I didn't even know why we were. And then suddenly we got out of the elevator, and there's a big plaque, and the plaque said, "You are standing in the spot that Swami Vivekananda stood when he spoke to the assembly
Yeah.
in 1899 or 1892 or whatever it was."
93
And I
maybe.
was like, I've never been in this spot before. And I wouldn't have been without one, reading Raja Yoga, studying yoga, going to Mysore, meeting Harmony, practicing yoga another 20 years, and then bringing Harmony back to Chicago. And here's this, how it's so an incredible kind of kismet that could happen. You think you've seen everything, and then like, oh no, because of this practice, you see in a different way now.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that what we learn, what the practice does for us also, yes, you will have those kind of encounters. You'll find yourself aligning with what the universe has to offer to you
Mm.
much better. You're just more open in a particular way. And my experience with doing practice is that it's helped me to navigate the things that are coming to me in my life in a different way. Not in a place of necessarily, even though many of the prayers are asking for help, like for example, the Hanuman Chalisa. We're invoking the presence of Hanuman, talking about his wisdom, his courage, his compassion, his wide heart, his playfulness, his courage. Courage is
Yeah.
a very big thing. As we do that, though, we're asking him for his help. And at the same time, we're asking him to come and live inside of us.
Mhm.
And all the great beings will say, he is no other, he's no different than you.
Yeah.
But we don't see that. We don't have that experience. And I don't know when we will. But what I do know is that the more we do the practices, the more I can see how that can be possible.
Hmm.
And so little things like this will happen, like you had this thing happen to you at the Art Institute. And that was like a signpost in a certain way, that you're turned in the right direction. It seems like that. That's probably what it might have felt like for you.
Mhm.
And a lot of that happens. And you start to see that in other people, the things that arise for you. And less it becomes a thing of, well, I'm going to do things this way, and more, let's just see what happens when we allow things to happen. What
Hmm.
happens? How do we accept it? How do we let it move through us? And we become more porous in a certain way, and let life move through us.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think maybe some of our listeners don't know the lineage of that. I mean, you're sort of aligned with and in the flow of, but starting, I guess, with Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji, and then moving down through Siddhama, and also through Krishna Das and all the great Dasas, Ram Das and Baba Hari Das, and all of, Nim Karoli Baba's sort of Western seeds that he planted, and that really, I think, have changed, or I guess transformed, really kind of brought these teachings to the West for Westerners and people born in the West. And then you came to, um, like, through Krishna Das, through meeting him and his kirtan, but then you also went back to India as well, right? And kind of like moved into that flow, into that lineage. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey, kind of from home, like around back to yourself, which is kind of what we're talking about too, like coming to meet yourself
Exactly.
again.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I always joke about this, I say that I had to come to New York to chant with a Jewish guy from Long Island to learn the Hanuman Chalisa,
Yeah.
and this is why when people talk to me about, cultural appropriation and things, I always preface any of this kind of discussion, because there is cultural appropriation, but in the realm of spirituality and spiritual practice, these teachers came to share
Mhm.
what they knew. Sri Ramakrishna sent Vivekananda out here. He sent him. So for me, my journey, you know, I grew up in India where we're surrounded by these type of practices. So it's very much in my being. I also lived in Thailand as a young person, but I also lived in Canada, and I went to Catholic schools. And wherever there was a sacred space, I felt myself drawn to. I recognize that now without even really understanding that I might be on some kind of a particular path when I got older. It just didn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like that in our family. We did a small puja at home every night before dinner, light an incense, light a lamp, and then we would eat dinner, but it was never really discussed.
Mhm.
And it was only as a teenager when I went to my grandfather's home. Um, he was an engineer for the British government. He was always busy fixing wells and doing all kinds of things at home. He was retired at the time that I spent time with him. But he did have a harmonium, and he did chant. And he was a natural musician. He never And it was very devotional. He had a
Yeah.
beautiful puja room. Our presiding deity was Saraswati and Sharada Devi from the Sringeri Mutt, which you
Ah,
might know because
yeah.
you've been down in South India. So technically, that's my lineage, right?
Yeah.
Technically, but who's to say? And so here I am, I show up at this yoga class and I meet Krishna Das and I have a complete heart opening experience.
Yeah.
And I wanted what he had, which he was talking about, feeling this feeling of unconditional love and all this stuff with Maharaji. And I said, I want it. And of course, Maharaji wasn't alive anymore. He
Right.
left the body in 1973, and I'm meeting Krishnas in 1996.
Yeah.
So I started. He introduced me to Ramdas. I didn't know about Ramdas. Now everybody knows Ramdas. I can't walk into any place. I go into the hardware store, I go to Lowe's, and all the young people behind the counter know Ramdas.
Yeah.
Amazing. So Maharaji picked his route. He
Yeah.
figured out how it was that we were going to hear about
Yeah.
divinity and consciousness and love.
Yeah.
That one love, sabek, that he talked about all the time. So I had to meet Krishna Das in this way and be reminded of chanting, which I'd experienced as a child and stopped doing for many years because it just wasn't part of our home life. And I went to Kenchi because I said, okay, I won't meet Maharaji in this life, but let me just go to the place where you were. Something could happen.
Yeah.
And it was then that he told me about Siddhima. Siddhima didn't show herself to anybody. And she didn't want to be talked about. She never had her picture taken. I mean, she wouldn't let her picture be shown, taken, and so on. So, but when I went, Krishnadas said to me, he said, if you're going to Kenchi, then you should go at this time and you should meet Siddhima. Because he had spent time with her after Maharaji died. She kept the flame alive for all of Maharaji's devotees because she was so fully surrendered to him that the stories of him, his presence was there in her. And so they needed that. They hung out with her and they felt that presence with her. For me, I developed a relationship of my own with her, which is not to say that, everything Ma talked about was she said, I don't know anything, Maharaji would say this. People who were with Maharaji would say, I don't know anything, I'm just a prasad wala Baba. Go ask Hanuman. You ask Hanuman and Hanuman says, go and ask Ram. So nobody wants to take credit,
Yeah. I love it.
which is fine. But when I met Siddhima that first time, I knew that the place that I wanted to be was to go back and be with her as much as I could. So I did that for almost 20 years.
Amazing.
And so for me, she took that form that Maharaji was for Krishnadas and for Ramdas. And, they see divinity in that way, which is not to say that I don't. It's just for me, she sits inside of him.
Yeah.
And my portal, my doorway
Yeah.
is with her. And
Yeah.
that remains,
Yeah.
even though I'm doing many other practices.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I'm not just doing what she asked me to do. I went back to studying Veda. And then I was telling you about Garchen Rinpoche,
Yeah.
that it doesn't feel in any way that one negates the other. It just helps deepen my practice even further to be with beings like that. So that's been my journey, being with Siddhima and seeing her for all these years. I got married, I got divorced, I had a child, I raised a child, in all these contact with her over the years. And so she's very much a part of my evolution, my soul evolution.
Yeah.
And when she left the body, it doesn't feel like she left in any way because her presence, she kind of installed herself inside of me. And they say that the guru is no other than the presence of divinity in your own heart. And so if we can all learn to trust that, that's where the guru lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I
Um,
can I just
yeah.
ask, because our child is upstairs making a racket. I
I
want to
don't
go up
think you
there
can
and
hear.
throttle him.
No.
And I just want to know,
Uh,
what do you
She can hear.
do?
We
You've
just
raised a child, you've been married, you've been divorced,
yeah.
and I'm very often I feel like, I could still be married to that other person if I could have just, done my practice better. But I just spent all my time absolutely furious. And I'm just wondering, like, and then like you have a child and like you spend all your time absolutely furious. Like,
No,
how do you maintain the
you do.
the seer within the self with all of these,
With life happening all
this
around you.
life happening all around, and it's like, you're
You
trying to
know, you
experience enlightenment. And there's like little flies and bugs outside.
I mean, you can't experience enlightenment, right? You can just know because you've had an experience of connection with that space. You've had it
Mhm.
Mhm.
at various points in your life. You might not know particularly when, but the very fact that you're drawn towards practice, you already have an inner understanding and a longing for that space. It's
Mhm.
there in you, it just is there. But our karmas have made us be born into this life where we're not renunciates. We are householders. This is what
Mhm.
we do. Siddhima was a householder. So was Maharaji. They
Yeah.
were both married. They both had children.
Mhm.
But their path in life was ultimately to leave that and move into a space of uh, serving others as enlightened beings,
Mhm.
you know. But they went through that and they were able to see that their purpose, it was not even like they made a decision, it just was what it was. I don't know, I can't pretend to understand what their life path was. I have no idea. You know, my daughter asked Siddhima once, she said, Ma, do you have any children? And she said, you're all my children.
Yeah.
I mean, I know she has children and grandchildren, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
she really saw the world that way,
Yeah.
that we were all her children. And her family accepted that too when
Mhm.
she moved out of the family and was available for everyone. But for me, you know, don't have a chance if I don't do practice. I don't have a chance.
Mhm.
We all get caught up in our stuff. My divorce, I fell in love. I went to Ma and I said, I want to get married. And she said, okay, good, get married. And then I said, I want to get divorced. And she said, okay, let's find a way to do this in the best way.
Mhm.
And when I had a child, she said to me, she said, keep your child close while you're doing puja. Let her experience that, like, in vitro, in utero,
Mhm.
and also, and so I did. She was always, and after she was born, when I was nursing, I was chanting. When I took her out to play, we were chanting. She learned the Hanuman Chalisa when she was very young. I took her to the
Mhm.
first place I took her after she was born. She was 4.5 months old. I took her for Siddhima's darshan. I
Mhm.
gave
Mhm.
her all the vaccinations, everything that all the mothers didn't do. I was
Yeah.
like, I have to take her to India if she's going to have to get vaccinated. And I took her. And for me, that felt like what I needed to do for her.
Mhm.
And, she suffers the same anxieties that young children do these days too, despite the fact that but she also has an awareness
Mhm.
of this space of presence, because she's experienced it and she understands that you can connect with it by doing practice. And I don't recommend anything for her. She's a grown person. She does what she needs to do for herself.
Mhm.
All I can do is do my practice and be there for her as her mother in the
Mhm.
best way that I can.
Mhm.
And that way she can feel the love, she can feel my commitment, she can feel my um I might get upset about certain things, but she knows that I'm there for her. She knows I'm working on myself,
Mhm.
and she will do it in the way that she does it.
Mhm.
And so But what I do know is that if we don't do practice all the time, when things are bad, when things are good, we don't have that buffer that we need to for us to be a witness to our lives and to see where it is that maybe we could do things differently.
Mm.
Otherwise, we're just reactive all the time.
Mhm.
So, the more practice that we do, sure, we're going to have moments of reacting, but you might recognize that those reactive moments are shorter, or there might be less. You might not get carried away. You might have a moment like, oh, okay, let me try to look at this a different way. Your perspective shifts.
Mhm.
The eyes with which you see the world changes in a way that's helpful to live your life in a better way.
Mhm.
So, of course, our kids are going to drive us crazy. Everything that
Mm.
it's going to happen,
Everything
and
drives us
you
crazy.
can't stop. Like I have so much anxiety about her well-being as her
Yeah.
mother,
Yeah.
and all the teachings are about you know attachment is what's causing suffering for us. But
Mm.
I'm a mother. I have a kid. I've got
Yeah.
to do what I have to do for her, and if it's my attachment to her that's going to um, propel whatever it is that I do for her, then so be it until it stops.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I love that too, that idea that like it's all the fuel we need for our own like development and our own.
Yeah.
So when we have the attachment and we have that worry or concern, that's also the opportunity for us to like surrender and to open
Hmm.
ourselves up to something greater and to trust, and so it actually is like the medicine that we need in a way, even though, you know, there's an aspect of maybe our thoughts that think, oh, just be easier to live in a cave and do our spiritual practices all the time and not have to deal with all of, these troublesome life things and
A,
attachments that we have.
a clean cave with air conditioning,
Yeah,
you mean?
Exactly. And
yeah,
a latte delivered to the
right.
door every morning.
Yeah,
Here we
I
go.
mean, we we can't even sit for half an hour
yeah,
in a quiet space in our bedroom
yeah.
Yeah.
without thinking of all the million things that we have to do. Where is that going to go if we sit in a cave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll
It
be
doesn't
like,
go anywhere.
we'll be revamping the cave in no time.
Yeah.
I I went there was a in Mysore on Chamundi Hill there's a fellow Swamiji, and I really liked visiting with him. I don't know if and
The cave
the
Swami.
cave Swami, and I used to go and visit the cave Swami, and then I was learning Ayurvedic massage at one point, and he had heard, oh, you're doing Ayurvedic massage, and then I got a call from a friend, and it's like, I need someone to do Ayurvedic massage on Cave Swami, and like, you're up. I was like, drive my little scooter up the Chamundi Hill to go see Cave Swami, and I'm really kind of nervous and excited, and I go into the back cave, and there was a TV in there with CNN on. I'm like, what the hell is this? And I'm doing my, my
Puja in the front, news in the back.
puja in the front, news in the back, like a mullet. And I'm just doing my Ayurvedic massage and watching, Wolf Blitzer. It's the
Did you ask
weirdest.
him?
Wolf Blitz. No, Wolf. No,
No.
Cave Swami. I never thought about asking him. I think I was too frightened to ask him about why is there a TV in here. And I was just like, there's a TV. I don't know what else to say. What could I have asked him?
I don't know. What
Yeah.
Swami, like, do you like to watch the news?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
He would have said, yeah, I like to watch the news.
You're right. And so then, we also don't know. I don't know this Swami, but we also don't know how these beings are communicating with the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know how it is that they're offering their prayers to the world. We don't know. And so, if that is the way in which he chose to live his life, good. We don't
Mm.
know how he was offering his precise. Is he still around?
He passed a
Yeah.
couple
Okay.
2 years ago, was it? It was very
Okay.
sad.
Yeah, or three maybe.
Yeah.
But he was a blessing for you.
Mm-hmm.
When everybody went, you all went to see him, you learned something from him.
Yeah.
Some Babas would feed people. Um, who knows? Maybe this Baba was providing some kind of solace through the television. I mean, I can only imagine
Yeah.
I really don't know. Like, it's too hard to judge these things. We don't know anything.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have no idea what's going on.
He was
If we
like a
can just,
prasad
yeah,
wala baba. Yeah.
Prasad Wala
He
Baba.
gave out the prasad.
yeah, Maharaji fed people. That's what he did. He
Hmm.
liked to give people food. And there are lots of Babas like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
know. We have no idea what's going on. If we can just pay attention to doing our own practice, that's about the best we can do. And
Yeah.
try just be good to other people. That's all we can do,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. I love that. I'm curious. I think also many, a lot of our listeners, of course, are dedicated Ashtanga yoga practitioners, and so they have a very um, fixed idea of what practice means, right?
Orthodox.
That like practice is an asana practice, and I've you know that was part of my entryway into yoga practice, but I actually was first interested in meditation practice and Buddhism, and then went into more
I see.
asana, and then studied with a pranayama guru, Sri O.P. Tiwari, and really dived into pranayama as well. So, and like you, I've always had a very expansive interest in just spiritual practice and spiritual discipline, and a degree in religious studies. Like that's what I love, is just looking at religious traditions and what like feeds people's soul and how they connect and different ways people connect. But for someone who really is fixed on this asana practice, is like, okay, this is my spiritual practice, which, like you say, is wonderful because you get to dig that well deep, and you know what to do, and you're not like lost at sea. What should I do
Mm.
today? But for, just, as a little light, if someone were to see your practice, and it doesn't obviously have to be your specific practice, but as someone who's taken on kirtan and chanting and bhajans as a spiritual discipline, what does that look like as a daily spiritual practice?
Yeah. So again, it's so individual. For me, I people ask me this question all the time because I teach a lot of like chanting courses, and
Yeah.
the point of sharing all these practices is really for each person to decide what is their own practice, like what is going to be good for them.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And you have to determine that, because if you're not, like I was saying, if you're not initiated into a particular lineage where you've been told, like, this is what you should do, and you accept that as your practice, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But you don't have that, then you have to create something for yourself, which is why I say, like, if you find a practice that resonates with you, you'll do it. So you want to include that in your practice as much as possible.
Mhm.
So for me, I say to people, it varies. I used to translate for Siddhima. So when people would come to her, and she'd say, okay, go and do, make sure you do 11 Hanuman Chalisas today, or just go and do Bajrang Ban, and maybe you should, different people had different instructions.
Hmm.
And so one day I said, Ma, you've never asked me to do anything particular. So she looked at me and she said, oh, you're so busy, just do what you can. So
That's so sweet.
I didn't even know what to do with that. So I've had to figure out, like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
um, so on some level, I think I'm happy that she didn't ask me to do one thing in particular, because I think I just wouldn't be able to do it. Or I don't know. Who
Yeah.
knows? Different
Mm.
people do different things, and it doesn't really matter. But the point is that the more I've done practice, the more I've realized how important it is for me to do it.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And I keep getting those signals, wherever I turn. And so I think it's very important to when you first wake up in the morning,
Mm.
just let's not even worry about what your practice is. Let's just think about waking up in the morning before everything, before those clouds start floating through your mind about just even before that. Let's just try to even be aware of that moment when you're awakening from your sleep. To just take a second there, to just rest in that space for 1 minute and be grateful for the day that's ahead. That
Mm.
is, we're going to have the opportunity to do practice. So let's even just start there
Yeah.
by taking a few breaths. I try to do that in the morning because some nights we have anxious nights. We can't sleep some nights,
Mhm.
or your partner who's with you is anxious and they're not. So how can we just create this discipline, this moment that we just take in the morning before we wake up and do, before we reach for the phone? Okay, reach for the phone and turn off the alarm. Put it back down. Don't open your phone,
Yeah.
and just lie there for a minute. And if you have a mantra that you like, try to maybe repeat that mantra. If you have your mala, try to do a round of your mala before you even get out of bed. Now, these are all not all pakka practices, because there are ways, they say you should get out of bed, you should shower. Like, there's a lot of
Right.
things you should do before you even do practice. But I feel like for us who live in this householder realm,
Yeah.
it's good to even start from a place where you can, you know,
Mhm.
and like for me, getting up in the morning and showering seemed almost impossible because I would get out of bed. I had to make lunch for my daughter, then I have to drive her to school. And there was just like one thing after, you have to take the dogs out for a walk. Like, there's all kinds of things that have to happen. So find a way to include your practice
Yeah.
in your daily life. So I get up, I make tea. So while I'm doing tea, like, okay, let me just try to listen to some chanting while I'm doing my
Mm.
tea. Or maybe do it myself quietly. It's not that you have to do it
Yeah.
out loud. It's not easy because you're already thinking about the 18 things you have to do in the day, and it's very difficult to do all that. But if you can keep reminding yourself that, oh yes, when I'm in the kitchen, when we're in the kitchen in Kenchi, the prasad is being prepared and the chai is being prepared by the cooks, and they're chanting while they're preparing the
Mm.
chai. So why can't we try to incorporate a little bit of that? So I just keep trying to remind myself. I don't know what else to tell you. And
Yeah.
I have my practice of, japa recitation, and I
Yeah.
do Hanuman Chalisa repetition, and I try to do some Veda chanting every day.
Yeah.
But it's the day runs away from me, and
Yeah.
I just keep moving forward. And then when I get invitations to talk to people like you, I take it as an opportunity to remember practice.
Mm.
Just remember practice. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
That is practice itself. Remembering practice is practice itself.
Yeah.
And so it's a great thing that you're doing by having this conversation. You're doing it for me, you're doing it for yourselves. And then hopefully the people who are listening,
Yeah.
it'll be a little bit of a reset, a way to remember.
Totally. I love that's so what you said is so it brought up so much for me. I also like have my alarm go off and then I hit the snooze and I just lie in bed and just be with like
Yeah,
myself
yeah,
before like facing the day, just like I'm just going to lie in this sweetness for at least 9
yeah.
more minutes before the second alarm goes off.
Okay, well, you're
Yeah.
lucky it lasts for like 9 minutes.
Well, that's how long
Yeah,
the snooze is. So
yeah.
but yeah, it's nice. But I love this idea of adding like some like a chanting, some mantra, something
Breathing.
that's breathing.
Just breathing is also okay. Just
Mm-hmm.
breathe and connect with that middle space, that
Yeah.
I wish we were waking up at 3 in the morning to do practice, which they say is the Brahma Muhurat, is like it's the auspicious time to do practice, but we're not.
Yeah.
It's okay. Because we just finished binge watching something else the
That's
night
right.
before, and way too late into the
Wild
night.
Wild Country is on.
Wild Wild
Okay.
Country.
And whatever it is, it's always
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
So how to then, but when we rest in sleep,
Yeah.
we're given that blessing
Mm-hmm.
to actually like fall into a different consciousness just for a little while. And when you're awakening from your sleep, it's there. It's there. It's just for a little few seconds. So just to feel that
Yeah.
before then you move into your 9 minutes of being in your space, which will include thinking of all the things that you have to do in the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
helps
I
to,
love
like,
that space.
if you just set the intention of like thinking of mantra or thinking about the guru for just that moment and having this feeling of gratitude for, okay, this is my day. I get a chance to practice whatever that practice is for you, and I get a chance to offer compassion to all beings. I get a
Yeah.
chance to be kind to other people and alleviate someone else's suffering. Like, maybe we can think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's powerful. I mean, if everyone woke up and just started their day that way, you could change the entire world. So
Mhm.
that'd be amazing. That'd be
That's the
beautiful.
beauty of that's the beauty of doing your prayers for other people,
Yeah.
because if you're doing it for others, then they're doing it for you.
Yeah. 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 It's wonderful. And that's
I
also like how I really sort of became very interested in chanting, actually, too, was when after I gave birth to my son,
Yeah.
and like you just can't do the asana practice like, for hours on end. And so
7 hours is
I was
good.
just really looking at like, how can I connect and find this connection to the divine and feel like I'm in the, like really in the flow of grace. And how
Yeah.
can I do that during, when I'm like, feeding an infant and
Changing their diaper.
changing their diaper, exactly, or like having to drive from one place to the next, or doing all of these new activities that were never a part of my day prior to
And you didn't have
to
time for them then.
yeah, prior to this. But it was like a saving grace, actually, too. It really connected me deeply into my heart center, and felt like, oh, this is like the asana of the heart. I don't actually need to do anything with
Mhm.
my body. I can just, cultivate this energy in this space right here, right now, in the present. And yeah, it's
And you
powerful.
do that when you're raising your babies, and you do that when you're helping somebody who's very ill. You do
Yeah.
that when you're in the hospital praying
Yeah.
for somebody having surgery. You do that when someone's leaving their body.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a safe space.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. Nothing can go wrong in that space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things can only be better.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I have a just I know that she has to get going, but I just have one more question. Maybe you might have many more questions, Harmony. I don't know.
I think we could talk all night.
But I'm really fascinated that you said that you'd been divorced, and I know Harmony has been divorced, and I've been divorced, and I would recommend it to anyone. Um, and when I was really, I was thinking so much about it when I was in the throes of it, about seeing the Krishnaness of someone in someone, and knowing that Krishnaness in them is the same Krishnaness in me, and we are recognizing each other's Krishna, and yet I just can't stand this person anymore. And I have preference, and I'm making a choice, and I don't even understand um how it's so confusing to think that any one choice could be better than another, and yet I do feel very strongly that I prefer harmony. And
What's your question?
my question is we've all been through this, and yet we've all made a decision. Something like this is like, yeah, this
Like,
I
how do you, like, what is preference?
reconcile preference. Yeah. And like, well, this is really better. This is better for me. Or even like, maybe this other guru is better for me than this other guru. I don't know.
all I can say is you have to do what feels right for you and try to cause as little harm as you can.
Yeah.
Divorces are hard.
Yeah.
Divorces are hard. It's painful for you, it's painful for the other person. If you have children with that person, then it's hard on the child.
Hmm.
So you try to, but it also could be hard on the child if you were staying in a marriage that wasn't working.
Yeah.
You don't know what kind of repercussions it would have on the child. So the assumption about getting divorced is that it's some kind of a failure, you know. But it doesn't, in our day and age, it just isn't.
Yeah.
We just have to do it in the best way possible. And yeah, I mean, it would be great if we could see the Krishnaness in everybody. We can't,
Hmm.
but we can try to remember. And it doesn't mean that you have to stay with them on the samsara level. It doesn't mean that you have to stay with them. You can still have good feelings for them. You can wish them well in your heart. It doesn't mean you have to live with them,
Hmm.
because that karmically could be done at that point. We don't know. We just have to try to do the best we can, that whatever we're doing, we do it with the best of intentions, with the fullness of our heart. And we learn that as we get older. When you're younger, you just don't know things.
Yeah.
You're looking for happiness in places that you didn't know, that is just going to give you the same result. I'm not saying that that's your choice, you choosing to get divorced and be with somebody else. That's just the trajectory of your life. Do it in the best way possible. Wish that other person well, and move on. Go on to the next thing. It doesn't mean that you're not evolving if you make those choices.
Mm-hmm. That's
Spiritual
so.
evolution. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But it goes right back to the beginning of our conversation about choosing a particular spiritual practice that calls to us, and it is also a choice that interrupts the lineage we might have been born into.
Yes, it
Or
can be.
another lineage that you chose
Hmm.
too, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
yeah.
Let's just ask ourselves the question, why are we doing practice?
Mhm.
If I ask you the question, what's your answer?
I get really frustrated otherwise. I get
Okay.
really
And for you, Harmony?
I do practice because I love to connect to that space, that inner space within, and feel that just unconditional love, you know, consciousness, peace. I don't know. It's that ineffable kind of like sweetness.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So that's a space I think we can say with great confidence that everybody wants to be happy,
Hmm.
have experienced that feeling of well-being.
Hmm.
But not everybody and none of us necessarily goes about it the right way to get that. We're looking for it outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
As we do more practice, we can find that space, all the great beings say, inside of us. And the way to connect with that space is through practice.
Yeah.
At least that's been my experience.
Mhm.
And, some
Totally.
people, I don't know how it is for others, but it's definitely been my experience. And so you have to find a way to trust in your own heart that you're traveling on your path in the right way for you. And along the way, you can bring everybody with you, your family, your partner, your children, your dogs, and share in that together.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's all we can do.
Yeah.
And wait for grace.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait for grace. I love. Wait for
Well,
grace, and
thank
just
you so
I
much.
love that too, and just be in the love. I love this idea of just, I think the Vedic mantras also have this idea of it being for everyone, for all of humanity, and it's not just like you're never asking for yourself, you're always asking for everyone. May we all, be blessed. May we all grow together. May we all experience peace and happiness and freedom. And there's some deep wisdom to that.
Yeah. I mean, when I say wait for grace, I really mean wait for us to be fully aware of the grace that we're surrounded with. We don't see it.
Yeah.
And, there are some people, there's a beautiful, I don't know where it comes from, but it's something like this where it says, grace is raining upon us all the time. We simply have to cup our hands. And the way we cup our hands is to make ourselves open to it. The way we do that is through practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's the perfect note to end on. Thank you. And if people want to join, I know you have this beautiful trip in India, and I think
you're a tiger conservationist.
Yeah, there's something to do with your nonprofit organization for conserving tigers and the wilderness, and a whole other aspect of your personal life and your career that we didn't talk about.
It's okay.
We didn't talk about the banking at all.
No, we don't need to talk about banking. But I mean, yeah, I'm going to India this fall. My daughter is now 21 years old, so I'm beginning to feel like some freedom of movement.
Yes.
Not that she required any. I mean, yeah. I've been touring, even since she was young, and she stayed with her father a lot of the time. But I am going to India for Devi Navaratri. I'm going to go to Kenchi and be there. Even though Siddhima is not there anymore, the festivities are going on all the time. And I feel like I'd like to be there. So I will be there in Kenchi. I'm not really selling this as a trip in any way. And I am going to the jungle. A lot of people are very interested in experiencing the wildlife of India. And so I will be spending a few days in a tiger reserve in the first week of November. So if anyone would like to join, that is something that I do have to book for people. And then I will be leading, as I was mentioning to you before, this sound healing retreat in a beautiful Ayurvedic village called Vaidyagram, which is in Tamil Nadu. And that information is all up on my website under the events. Yeah, it's there. It's over, I think it's actually over Thanksgiving weekend, if I'm not mistaken. But it is from the 22nd to the 28th of November.
Amazing.
And and so that information is all there. And there's you in addition to getting Ayurvedic treatments, which they will offer for those who sign up for the sound healing retreat, we'll be doing some Veda chanting with my teacher. We'll be singing kirtan with me. There's another Dr. Shubham Kulkarni who is teaching about raga, or the Indian form of classical music as a healing method. There's a lot of things being offered in this retreat, and Dr. Robert Svoboda will be there, and Dr. Claudia Welch will be there. It's a really beautiful retreat. So
it sounds incredible.
I would love for people to join.
Yeah, wow.
And we'll put it in the show notes so how people can sign up if they want to.
Of course, all the links to all of your
That would be great.
Websites
Thank you.
and everything. Yeah, thank you so much for being here with us today. It was just such a blessing and honor to have you.
I know you have to drive your daughter up north, so we don't want
I'm driving her to the Upper West Side, and I have to make my way up north. Yes, I'll be going to New Paltz. Yeah.
It was just such a rich conversation. Thank you so much.
It's really an honor. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you. It's really a special place to talk about this. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Finding Harmony. With me, your host, Harmony Slater. You can find out more information on my website, harmonyslater.com, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Standing in eternity's shadow, watching the breaking waves, there's a heart